think we're recording. Hello, I'm John Ryan with Broadsheet, and this is Tomorrow Tonight, where we give you tomorrow tonight. Reviewing the papers this evening, we're very honoured to have with us Councillor Dan Boyle. Hello, Dan.
Good evening, John.
Good evening. Dan, former Green Party TD, former Green Party Senator now, Green Party councillor in Cork South Central, Dan.
Cork City South Central, yes. Yeah.
Cork City South Central. There's a South Central that's kind of carried a line and all that.
South Central would be the Doyle constituency, and City South Central would be the section I represent locally. It would be kind of the city centre and kind of everything that emanates from it in a kind of the Loch, Turner's Cross, Ballyfian, Grange Frankfield, almost as far as the airport. That's basically my area.
Okay. And how are things down there?
It's an interesting time. Like most of the rest of the country, we're struggling with the situation as it is, but there are a lot of good things happening. And the strange thing about dealing with, I suppose, circumstances is that difficult circumstances open up other opportunities. And I found from a green perspective that it's been an interesting year in terms of active travel, in terms of cycleways and pedestrianising the city centre and looking at the city in a different way. We won't see the benefit of that until we're out of the COVID situation, but it's an interesting time, you know.
If things were to return, do you feel that good vibe about pedestrianisation will continue? Do you feel it's
I'm confident. Yeah, I think one sense we've had is that what COVID has told us is that there's nothing certain about life, and that life has to be different if it has to be better, you know. And I think we're going to be looking at everything a lot differently once we come out of this, I think. I hope, anyway.
Speaking on those, in the same sort of theme, Dan had a column today on the site about your friend Pete Soden.
Paul Soden, yes. Yeah.
Paul Soden, I beg your pardon, sorry. In fact, I was watching a video of him earlier, and he was, if you could explain it, because it's a little bit complicated, but sort of like he was involved in growing. Please, you explain it, Dan. Okay.
He was kind of a one-man version script of The Good Life, in the sense that he had been a financial advisor in Ireland, and he just decided to flip his life. For some reason, he decided to go out of Ireland, out of Cork, and he ended up in Brazil, where he found himself becoming a farmer, meeting someone, raising a family, becoming a farmer, the opposite of what he had been in Ireland. He approached farming in the sense that you tend to approach farming kind of the land needs nutrients, kind of artificial fertilizers and the like. And he found himself finding that didn't work. And then he stumbled upon this concept of regenerative agriculture. And he worked with people who were farming around him. And he just loved the concept. He loved the way it was achieving. And he used to travel back and forth between Ireland and Brazil and tried to convince people in Irish agriculture that this was a better way of doing things. And he also got himself involved in an international group called Kiss the Ground, who produce videos. They made a video of him. I think you might have seen that video. I think I had
that's the one.
Yeah. But he saw that as kind of an opening feature for a series of films they were doing. And this year they produced a fairly major documentary that was narrated by Woody Harrelson from Cheers. And he was promoting that like hell.
That's on Netflix, is it?
It is on Netflix, yeah. And It's a fairly major production because it's not only people like Woody Harrelson, it's like Gisele Bündchen, the Brazilian model, and like that. There's a number of high prominent people who are trying to sell the same message. And he was such an interesting guy, very inspiring. And
so you said, Dan, his death was COVID related in the end? Or
well, that was the frustrating part of it. As I said, he travelled back and forth quite often, and we always hooked up, if that's not the operative term. But he always wanted to talk to groups of people and telling them what he was doing. But I learned from a third party he had died. It happened to be someone I had introduced to him in Ireland, and introduced is the wrong word because it was someone he used to go to school with. Someone.
Mayor, is it?
The Lord Mayor of Cork last year, and he asked me whether I knew, and I didn't. And then I got a subsequent phone call from someone who was involved in rural development in Ireland, someone who was married to someone we mutually knew, a man who was involved in Winter Natira, of all things, in Tipperary. And this man is now well into his 90s, and he's a legend in his own right. But the last conversation I would have had with Paul was how we would have got together subsequently to celebrate this man's life. And it was such a long and detailed life, and Paul didn't have that benefit, which I thought was so ironic. Given
very sad.
Yeah.
Incredible. I have to say, that's a great picture of you and Paul. I shared the screen there. I don't know if you saw it.
It's actually in the Farmgate Cafe in the English Market in Cork, and it was Paul taking a selfie, and it was just totally uninhibited. But I like the picture myself because it just shows that the two of us having time for each other, basically.
Yeah. And he seemed very like in Brazil. They teamed up at the University of São Paulo, and so he's there with these kind of academics. It's so surreal out there for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you got to remember. I mean, he went to Christian Brothers College in Cork. He would have had that experience. He would have probably played rugby to some extent. He would have become a financial assessor, management consultant type of person. And then he just had this life change where he wanted to get out of Ireland, wanted to get out of Cork, wanted to live another life elsewhere. And the life he chose was so utterly different from the life he had lived. And I just had so much admiration for that.
Anyway, good. Paul Soden, RIP, very much. I'll just conveniently, the Irish Examiner is our first title. Dan, to go through the papers for tomorrow. Can you see that, Dan?
I can, and I'd seen it earlier. I mean, the Irish Examiner, which is now owned by the Irish Times, it provides a useful alternative in the Irish media. It's sense of highlighting an Irish situation that relates to Cork and the Munster region at the moment. The Cork University Hospital is triggering a major disaster plan that they had in place last March, but they didn't feel the need to put in place. But now they do because of the scale of the infection that exists, and which is both an effect of the Christmas and New Year's decisions that were made, but also because of the English variant and the multiplier effect that it's having. And it's a very scary time in Cork. Now, Cork it goes up and down a bit. We're still below the national average, but there are areas where it extends more than most. My own electoral area, we would have got up in October to about 800 out of 100,000, which was relatively high. At the moment, the Cork figure is about 550 out of 100,000, but it's serious. And outside of the border regions and outside of Dublin, Cork would be in that tier 1 region, I would argue, in terms of risks that are posed by COVID.
What does the disaster plan involve? Is it?
Well, the disaster plan, yeah, disaster plan is about resources. It's about making sure the emergency servers are online and that the ultimate amount of staff and resources are provided. It was a plan born, ironically enough, out of the Air India disaster of 35 years ago, but Cork dealing with kind of the potential of disasters from the petrochemical industries and the like. But the fact that we physically have to put into place now because of COVID is something that's very worrying. But the hope is that the planning has been done to the best possible extent, and we're going to put into practice the way it needs to be put into practice.
Okay, I'm going to go down these, so you pick anything you want to talk about. You turn on the opening of schools.
The other issue is the schools, and the government has decided it's not going to go ahead with its 3-day leaving cert proposal and the special needs schools. I must admit I'm disappointed because the advice is open to a lot of interpretation. I think NPHET has been constant and consistent in relation to saying that schools are not a source of infection or higher rates of infection. I think their risk comes from people going to and from their households and congregating and collecting children to and from schools. There's no doubt there are risks there. But in terms of special needs schools, and in terms of interrupting the education programs for people and leaving cert, I'm not sure it's the right decision. But given the fact that the teachers' unions and students themselves and some number of parents have expressed reservations, I don't think the government could have done anything other. I still hope that February 1st is a possibility for all.
Yeah. You're a NPHET person.
Well, I think NPHET, they've more or less said that schools are safe, and they've more or less said that the danger.
No, I meant generally. I mean,
oh yeah. No, I think it's important that well, look, government has a difficult situation. It has to balance things. It has to take physical health advice in terms of infections. It has to judge community mental health advice, and it has to judge economic consequences. But my inclination would be that you do it 1, 2, 3 in that order. And okay. If people are physically at risk from infection, that's what guides your decision-making process.
Okay, but you're not a fan of this brinkmanship then within NPHET. I mean, do you just think...
No. I think Leo in particular made a huge mistake in October in relation to challenging that. I would prefer a different system, though. I think the idea of, NPHET bringing out advice, the government making decisions, and it being judged then in the general media is not the best system, you know. I would prefer if the government made a decision, the media made the government accountable on the basis of subsequent information from NPHET being made available. Because I think there's a lot of second guessing going on at the moment. And people tend to forget
is that theatre down? I mean, is that sort of to kind of like, oh, good cop, but bad doc, good doc?
Well, there might be an element of that, but I think what a lot of people tend to forget in this situation, this is an utterly reactive situation. No one knows how to deal with this. Everyone is learning as we're going along. And our experience is no different than most other countries in the world, and particularly liberal democracies. We don't have the tools available to us like a totalitarian society like China or something like that. Like, you know,
we have a constitution. I mean, it's been ignored in all the kind of.
Well. Yeah. Well, look, that's in a public health situation. That's going to be one of the victims. There's no doubt about it. Because at the end of the day, we have to decide in a free society whether we have the freedom to become infected and we have the freedom to infect others.
Sure.
Choices that have to be made.
Sure. I mean, it's probably it's for another show, but we must get back to the papers, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm literally buggered for time, but this is great. Anything more on the examiner just before we?
No, I think that's the general sense. Yeah, the signer talking about someone, an individual who is who's getting the benefit of getting the injection, which is still very open. I think there's a question mark about how quickly and how effectively we're doing our vaccination program. But I would argue that that's totally down to us being involved in an EU situation. And I think we are vaccinating to the extent to which we're getting the vaccines. But there are questions about whether we're getting them quickly enough and whether we can vaccinate quickly enough. And I think that's open to public scrutiny and public concern. There's no doubt about that.
So can this is not promotion, but this is like the Sun is saying, very, very much a sort of a pro-vaccine. Is that, do you feel that there is any room for any counter opinion to these, to this sort of coverage? Do you feel that they should be banned and the like?
I'm not so sure we can afford the luxury, John, to be honest, because there are sectors of society, there are people in care homes that need to be looked after. There are people over 70 that need to be looked after. There are care workers. There are health system workers that need to be looked after. There are teachers on the front line that need to be looked after. There are people over 50 that need to be looked after. There are people with immune deficiency situations. And, I have type 2 diabetes myself. I'm probably well down the line, but it's the obsession is about getting everything done as quickly as possible. I think the strategy has to be about getting those who are most vulnerable done as quickly as possible. Because it's such a virulent contagion, I don't think we have a number of vaccines to deal with, two of which require higher levels of refrigeration and double doses, and a third one which is still to be approved, which is lower levels of refrigeration and a single dosage. And we need to work out the logistics that gets the vulnerable and the people who are most likely to die of this condition, because there are people who get the condition who will be asymptomatic. There are people who get the condition who will find it very uncomfortable. And there are people who will get the condition who will die. We have to have a health strategy that deals with each of those appropriately.
Okay. Let's move on to, well, it's a quiet news week in America. Did you see that?
Oh gosh, yeah, it was tapping in as much as anyone else.
You're American-born.
I'm an American citizen. I am. My parents were Irish immigrants. I was born in Chicago, and I have voted in American elections. I've chose not to vote in this particular one, but my vote would have had no difference if had I voted in this particular election. But it's.
You were going to vote Trump?
No, I think it was quite unlikely. Although I did vote for. Ralph Nader in one election, and I think that was the 2000 election actually, which was the one between Gore and George Bush Jr. That didn't have an effect either. But
he was the Green candidate, was he, that year?
He was technically the Green candidate, and I think that was a statement vote, whereas other votes wouldn't have been. But this time, I knew my vote wouldn't have had an effect. Look, there's no doubt that Trump was and is a person of lower capacity, and I use that word difficult in quite deliberately. I don't mean in mental capacity or anything like that. I'm talking about moral capacity. I'm talking about the ability to be politically astute. I'm talking about the ability to be socially aware and conscious. He lacks all those qualities. He's a sociopath, and he doesn't identify in any way with other people other than himself. And he's been an utter disaster for his nation, and the fact that his nation still has a prime role. You can argue about whether that should be the case or not. He's been a disaster for the world, particularly in terms of the international policy in relation to climate change and things like that. So I have no sympathy for the man. But what happened yesterday was the only time we've seen naked fascism in place since Germany and Italy since the 1930s. It was mob rule. It was people being led by rhetoric, to not even think for themselves, to be fed a constant line about how they should think rather than whether they should think and what they should think. And it's sad. Now, America is a superpower in decline, but we still need it to have some kind of status in the world that we're facing into, because
would you prefer a more dominant China than with a less dominant US?
Well, no, it's not. It's not even so much the countries who are involved. I would like a more democratic China. I'd like a less autocratic imperial United States. It's not that simple.
But it's China's gain is the US's loss is China's gain at this stage.
Well, there's no economically, certainly, and in terms of world influence, that's also the case. But maybe that's the role the EU can play. But we're dealing with our own situation in terms of Brexit and Britain alone, or UK alone, or England alone, whichever way they're going to define that. I
have to state on the record again that Dan, you're anti-Trump and anti-Brexit, virulently as well.
I am. Yeah, I think they're two sides of the same coin, and I think that that the world we live in at the moment is either that you believe in a world that there's international cooperation, or you believe in a world where that there are competing national narratives and which are based on the belief that there is a strength and a belief that one country is better than the other. And
not necessarily better, but proud and culturally different. There's we're not exception. It's not exceptionalism. I mean, I would be very anti-globalist, and even increasingly so in the last 10 years.
Well, I don't think internationalism is globalism, to be honest. I don't think internationalism is globalist, to be honest. I think there's a confusion in relation to the narrative that.
Well, you know what I mean. I think, Dan, you know what I mean. It's United Nations, EU. It's taking away sovereign power from Ireland, from any country that's.
Well, the debate, I think, is about what extent sovereignty can be shared and should be shared. Where he is totally separate, and anyone can be in isolation and make decisions on their own basis. We don't live in that world anymore.
I know. No. I mean, I'm not suddenly an isolationist. But that is the. Okay, we could be at this all night.
Philosophy.
But fantastic con today as well, by the way. Just because we're running out of time, this is the New York Times case and confirmation that tomorrow's.
The interesting thing about the States is about the rats deserting the ship. That there's today we've had the first resignation of a cabinet member of Trump's cabinet. We've had high-level resignations from state appointments as well. But interestingly enough, it's Mitch McConnell's wife who's going to Monday. And I think And the relationship with Mike Pence as his vice president has been totally sundered. I think what we're going to see over the next 2 weeks, if not an Article 25 or an impeachment, is an attempt by the Republican establishment to further distance themselves from Trump as much as possible. And the only question is how many and to what extent and to what distance. And what we might see is the establishment of a third-party system in the United States.
Yeah,
and that
might, without question, that's going to happen. But I don't think, I don't think it's over yet. Really, I don't think. Do you think
No. Well, I think that might even encourage a mirror response in the Democrats, who themselves are a coalition, and you might a four-party response.
Quite, yeah.
And that might be a real democratic United States.
Yeah. And all because of Trump. What a guy. Dan, we're going to have to go. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, John.
Hopefully you'll come back next week or whatever, whenever you're free, okay?
Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan.
Talk to you then. Bye.